Oligarchy. A few people share power. Between about 800 and 650 BCE, most Greek city states were ruled by a small group of wealthy men. These men were called oligarchs, from a Greek word meaning few. In an oligarchy, the ruling power lies in the hand of a few people. Most Greek oligarchs were aristocrats, rich men who had inherited land from their families. A few oligarchs were wealthy merchants. Oligarchs had very comfortable lives and often spent their days either hunting or participating in chariot races. In the evenings, they might host or attend parties during which slaves and hired performers entertained guests with music, dance, and acrobatics. Unlike the aristocrats, the poor were required to work long hours in the fields. They noticed the unfair differences between their difficult lives and the easy lives of the wealthy aristocrats. To make matters worse, the oligarchs ignored a majority of the people's needs. By passing laws that favored the rich, the oligarchs protected and increased their own wealth. Using the army, they forced others to obey these unjust laws. In some cities, such laws forced farmers who were unable to pay their debts to sell themselves into slavery. Under the rule of the oligarchs, the rich became richer and the poor became poorer. Because of their hate for the oligarchs increasing, the poor eventually turned to their leaders who promised to improve their lives. Typically, these leaders were in the army. Backed by the people's support, they used their soldiers to remove the oligarchs from power. Section 3. Tyranny. One person takes power by force. During the mid 600s BCE, people in many Greek city states relied on the men who had promised to change the government. These men who forced the oligarchs from power were called tyrants. In a tyranny, the ruling power belongs solely to one individual who is not a lawful king. A tyranny is sometimes called a dictatorship, and a tyrant is another name for a dictator. This form of government in ancient Greece lasted until about 500 BCE. A tyranny differs from a monarchy in several ways. First, tyrants cannot claim that the laws of the land give them the right to rule. Also, there are no legal limits on tyrants' powers. Additionally, the children of tyrants do not typically inherit their father's power. Although tyrants in ancient Greece were likely to take and maintain control by force, they were often popular. Most Greek tyrants were military leaders who gained the support of the people by guaranteeing them more rights. Once they were in power, many Greek tyrants implemented changes that improved the lives of the poor. Some even canceled the debts of struggling farmers, while others were hostile to aristocrats and confiscated their land. Some tyrants, though, did not use their power to help the people. Hippias, the last tyrant to rule the city state of Athens, is one example. Along with his brother, Hippocrates, Hippias ruled well at first. But then, two enemies of the brothers murdered Hipparchus. From then on, Hippias ruled more harshly. He paid spies to report anyone who criticized him. His rule continued to become increasingly cruel. Finally, the people drove him from power, and soon after, Athens would try another form of government, one that divided power among all the people. Section 4. Democracy. All citizens share power. Around 500 BCE, the people of Athens were the first in Greece to attempt to govern themselves. They developed a form of government called democracy, or rule by the people. In a democracy, all citizens share in the ruling power. Ancient Greek democracy differed from democracies today. The government of Athens was a direct democracy in which every citizen is allowed to vote on every issue. Unlike Athens, the United States is a representative democracy. In this type of government, people may vote for representatives who then decide issues on behalf of the people. How did direct democracy function in Athens? The city had an assembly or lawmaking group. With the assembly, any free man could speak and vote on a possible new law or a proposal to declare war. Free men also controlled the city's daily business. However, not all Greeks believed that democracy was a beneficial type of government. Powerful speakers sometimes persuaded ordinary citizens to vote unwisely. Frequently, an assembly reversed important decisions after merely a few weeks. Conflicts like these led most city states to return to their earlier forms of government, such as dictatorships and oligarchies. Regardless, the idea that people can and should rule themselves would survive. In time, the ideal of democracy would become one of the great gifts from ancient Greece to the modern world. Lesson summary. In this lesson, you read about four different forms of government used by ancient Greek city states. A monarchy, one person inherits power. Most Greek city states were monarchies until about 800 BCE. In a monarchy, one person, usually a king, holds the power. Ancient Greek kings had councils of aristocrats to help them rule. Oligarchy, a few people share power. Between 800 and 650 BCE, most Greek city states were ruled by oligarchies, in which power is held by a few people. Most oligarchs were wealthy aristocrats who ignored the needs of poor people. The poor eventually turned to leaders who promised to improve their lives. Tyranny. One person takes power by force. From the mid 600s to about 500 BCE, many Greek city states were ruled by tyrants. Tyranny is a form of government in which a person who is not a lawful king holds the power. Democracy. All citizens share power. The people of Athens were the first Greeks to develop a form of democracy, known as a direct democracy, in which every citizen was allowed to vote on every issue.